Let's get started. Welcome to the Monday, September 22nd Board of Selectmen's meeting. Introductions, we have Kelly Bigos, our recording secretary, Tom Wooden, our town manager, and Selectmen J.D. Warren, Russ Hoffman, myself, Denise Griffin, Bill Hamlin, and Wendy Wolf. So, the next item on the agenda is town manager announcements.
Only just a couple of reminders. Tomorrow night at 6 o'clock, we have an economic development meeting here with the Boothbay Selectmen, and I think there's some other representatives that were invited to it as well. And on Wednesday at 6 o'clock, right here, we have a public hearing for the comprehensive plan. So that's the only two announcements I have right now.
Okay, so it's a busy week here in this room.
Yeah, sure is.
All right. And I believe we're going to forego financials tonight because the financial treasurer is out of the office today. So we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Can I have a motion?
I must apologize. I don't have my copy of the minutes with me, and I had some corrections that would require that they be taken off the consent agenda. So, Kelly, you don't have an extra copy of the minutes, do you?
I can make you one.
Yeah, if you make me one, I will scribble them down to share. I think I can remember most. Yeah, if you don't mind.
All right. Well, then, in that case, we'll table that for a few minutes and move to approving a liquor license for China by the Sea. So can I have a motion?
Move to approve. Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries. All right, I think the minutes are going to take a few minutes, no pun intended. So we'll move on to our big agenda items tonight are two guest speakers. So we have first under continuing business, the Boothbay Region Ambulance Quarterly Report. Thank you. Mr. Ham.
All right. We've got some documents there that are kind of back up. It's not as pretty of a report as I usually give. We're in the middle of preparing for an audit, so it's been a little scrambled in the office. But I'll go through some of the, it's been kind of a crazy summer, which you'll see from the call volume. I've seen stuff this summer I never dreamed I would have expected. And there's been some stuff that I expected to be troublesome for us that wasn't, so just different. But the high points are, I think Russ has been keeping you up to date, but we're doing a little different procedure on our audit this year. We've hired a different firm to do that. We're in the process of changing billing companies. We're working through the budget. Some of the format and the line items in the budget, you're going to see a change as the auditor realigns and organizes that a little bit better, I hope. The biggest noticeable change in the call volume is the PIFT, which are paramedic interfacility transfers that we knew were going to go down. We are doing some of them out of miles, but it's down from 43 the year before, 36 last year, to 6 so far this year. So it's and those are our best paying transfers.
Could I interrupt you for a second? I'm just trying to understand where you're speaking from, and
I'm speaking from notes that I made. The PIFs, the call volume graphs are probably the easier thing to look at for.
Okay, because I'm trying to understand, one says 2014 and one says 2015, which we aren't there yet, so I'm trying to figure out what I'm looking at.
I think those two are mislabeled.
Okay.
The 15 is the current year that we just started, and the 14 is last fiscal year.
FY.
Yep,
Yeah,
FY.
Starting in July.
But no, I'm looking at these spreadsheets right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Okay, so 2014 14 is actually the previous fiscal year.
Yeah,
Previous
July
fiscal year.
to-
And this is our current fiscal
Yep.
year.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand what you,
I'll skip to
Distributed.
those exact pages in just a second. I'm just trying to give a quick
Okay.
brief. So, and I don't think I gave you the PIF call volume other than in a graph anyways. But anyways, those are what we consider specialty care transfers. We still do them. When we do them out of miles, we get the specialty care rate and we get the PIF rate. When we do them out of the urgent care, where the urgent care is a wing of the Miles campus now, we can't bill that specialty care rate for that. It's the same, the person gets the same care, we have the same rules and requirements. It's just that the insurance companies don't consider that a facility. That's, in their eyes, it's a doctor's office. And that's part of the linking the licenses together. So that's, we are doing some out of miles and it's working out, but. Our average response time from time of page to vehicle out of the station still remains under 2 minutes. We've been out of the area for 2 mutual aid calls this summer. One to Wiscasset, or Edgecombe, to back up Wiscasset ambulance, and we went to Monhegan about 3 weeks ago to bring somebody back. It was the weather was too bad for the helicopter to fly. That resulted in a trip to Monhegan and then a transport from the Coast Guard station to Miles. Our community paramedicine has been picked up quite a bit in the spring, then we had a little bit of a lull in the summer, which was expected due to people's families are here. Some of the elderly don't need as much help in the summer because they get visitors. It started to pick up again. We've seen the number of 23 patients. A good portion of that is duplicates, so I only can tally it based on patient name. So I'm assuming we've probably done between 70 and 100 visits to those 23. That's just that helps bridge the gap between home health and the district nurse to get some of the people that need a little extra help, some extra help. We've had the helicopter on the peninsula once this summer. We've called them and had to cancel them once, and we've had 2 opportunities to call them when the weather was too bad for them to fly. And our critical care transport program, I think, is growing some feet again, and hopefully over the winter that will start up. That's going to help us pick up some of that PIF revenue back. We'll get a little bit higher regard and higher, more choices for the calls and the patients that we can transfer. So that's something that we started a year and a half ago. Kind of fell by the wayside. It wasn't popular at the time. It's picking up traction again. So now that the community paramedicine is working, I think that this other thing will pick up and move forward. That's my quick sheet. The 2014 all calls grouped by shift. Down at the bottom, 611 were daytime first calls. 381 were nighttime first calls. The other 2 numbers were the amount of times when there was more than 1 ambulance out at a time. It's very difficult in the main EMS software to break it up finer than that, but that's 2, 3, it could be 2, 3, 4, whatever. That's the amount of time that there's more than 1 crew on the road at a time. And I think there may be a graph to depict that. If you, but that's kind of where we expected to be. It's our crew utilization. The next one is the 2015 all calls grouped by day and night shift. It's the same data, that's just from July 1 to, I don't know if it was current or if it was, I don't know what the date range was, but it's from July 1 to current, I would expect. That was 145 calls day shift, first call 70 times during the day. There was more than one truck out at a time.
Robbie, are these day-night numbers about what you expected? Different than what you expected?
The call volume is very close to what we planned, so it's, you know, it's reasonable.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think we were busier in some aspects this summer than I thought we would be.
Yeah, again, I'm uninitiated, so I don't really know how to filter these, but my first take looking at these numbers is you were really busy in the summer.
Yes.
And at night, in the winter, not so much.
Yep. And the one thing that, I don't have the calls broken down by day, but the strange thing is we were busier weekday nights than we were weekend nights. We spent many a weekend thinking that, you know, there's 3 bands at the 3 different bars on the dock, and we figured we were gonna be busy, and, you know, all the different stuff going on, the bikes, you know, a lot of really busy weekends this weekend. And it seemed like the busiest weekends were the slowest ones for us. And then when you think that, okay, we got over the hump and you'd go to bed on Tuesday night, you know, you wouldn't sleep for 2 days. So it was really strange that way. When we had a lot of good events without any incident, road races, you know, all kinds of events around town.
Yeah, we were a ton of events this year.
I think Windjammer Days, the Wednesday, it was 2 calls all day long. It was just, you know, so. And then, I don't know, I gave you a sheet just breaking down the call volume, and year to year. We had 617 total last year, and then the breakdown with St. Andrews and Miles, that one.
Yeah.
Yep. That's pretty much what we expected. We're obviously a little bit above halfway in call volume, but this, you know, we've been through our busiest half of the year, so it's nothing too earth-shattering there, just what it is. The miles, or the mid-coast stuff goes up in the fall and winter because the local people tend to have the doctors out of town that they go to. The summer volume is a lot of people that don't have relationships with doctors in the area, so they go to the closest hospital. So that'll probably fluctuate back up again. The miles will go down a little bit and mid-coast will go up a little bit.
But the overall, if I add up the numbers here for the fiscal year 2014, the overall on here, if I add those up right, I don't know if I did the math right, is it 1333 calls total?
That sounds about right. I don't think I added it up either.
So, and I had in my mind, I was kind of trying to find it in my file. I had in my mind that, you know, the other years you might have done about 1,400 calls, more or less.
Yep, we're slightly down.
You're slightly down, but that's not significant.
Not what we thought it was gonna be, but down.
Yeah,
Down slightly, but not as bad as we thought it was gonna be.
yeah, it's kind of,
I'll look at those numbers and get them for you in a second.
okay. And so what about, so this is all call volume. What about, how did you end up the year budget-wise?
Okay, budget as we stand right now, the only thing that I'm concerned about here is the billing revenue numbers because of the billing company issues. I'm not 100% confident in the numbers, but budget to date, we budgeted spending $923,000 Our actual expenditures were $866,495. We're down there. That does include the difference of not funding the capital reserve, which is a discussion that we've been having at the board level about funding that.
So Robbie, maybe you could explain a little bit more about the billing issues. I'm not sure that everybody at the table really knows the background there.
Okay, last year, there was a personnel change at the billing company. They made some errors. We've managed to prove to them that they made an error. They credited us $23,000 to $24,000. So they've been doing all of our billing since about April at no cost, working off that credit. And during that period, we've been trying to work with them to figure out if we could resolve the issues or if it was going to be time for a change. And in the last month, we've determined internally that it was time for a change. We've recouped all but $5,000 of that money. Probably in the next billing cycle, we'll probably be very close to recouping the rest of it. But the board of directors has voted to move to a different billing company as of October 1st. The two proposals that we felt were the most appropriate, along with myself and Scott's recommendations, just went out to the board today via email for review. The billing rate will stay the same at 4.5% of what they collect is, so the impact to our operating revenue based on the rate of collection will stay the same. The big difference is this billing company that I hope we're going to move to, they have a website. People can go online and pay their bill by credit card or however form they want. The billing company that we currently have would take credit card information over the phone, but they didn't have a website. They couldn't deal with people that way. The only other comparable quote that we got was comparable in money, but they didn't have any electronic collection means. So a lot of that's what our recommendation to the board is to, it's another company out of Massachusetts. There's basically, most of the ambulance services in the state of Maine use one of these two. A lot of the municipalities use the smaller of them, but we felt that the larger billing service, the rates were the same, but we felt with the website and somebody being able to go online and call up their account number and make a payment would probably help our collections. So hopefully that's what the board will agree on and we'll move forward with. It's been 7 or 8 months of kind of torture to wade through it and deal with it, but we felt we kind of had to recoup as much as we could from them. So, and that's why I'm not terribly confident in the revenue numbers that they're giving us in reports. We're just trying to pull all those reports now for the auditor, so once that gets sorted out, it'll all be much clearer. But right now, I think we're a little behind on billing because of the busy months. Some of the money hasn't come in yet. I think that our only shortfall right now is not funding the capital reserve. And that's, like I said, we've been talking about that at the board level.
And what would that be, roughly?
That would be, it was a $47,000 line item, and I believe you guys are just a hair over 50% of that, or just a hair under 50%. It would be broken out by last year's, formula. And I'm just trying to make sure that everything's in order before I invoice for that, and I can back everything up, but that's, and if we can do that, that, in my opinion, puts us even, and it still, in the long run, is saving a little over $55,000 to the 3 towns. So, not quite as good as we thought we were going to be at Christmas time, but still ahead of the game.
Well, I'm just curious, since I'm new to this discussion. You mentioned most ambulance services use one of two vendors.
Yes.
And I'm curious, do you guys belong to like a common association or if,
There is a
what I'm
main.
going to ask is, if ambulances are mostly using two vendors, I'm just wondering if you guys have any collective clout to negotiate better rates if you would come in and use a vendor that assures, say, a large group of ambulances are using and they cut you another 0.5% on their rate, which would be to your advantage.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, there is the Maine Ambulance Association that is out there. I don't know if, I mean, the billing company that I believe that we're gonna switch to, Waldeboro already uses. So some of the services around us are already using them, so I'm not sure if we could go to them and say, but, and the big services in the state, most of them do their own billing. But you've got to have a pretty huge call volume to be able to justify that expense in-house. So, I mean, I can look into that, but I think that we're gonna be at 4.5%,
Okay.
which is equal to where we were with, I believe, a lot better service.
Well, that's good news. But if you could find out what Maine Ambulance Association
Yep.
provides with regard to any sort of, I guess, business breaks for belonging to the association. It may not provide any, but that'd be nice to know.
I mean, I could also talk to the other services, and if we can align contracts, and maybe, you know, the Lincoln County Services, if there's 2 or 3 of us, maybe we can say, you know, hey, you're getting the lion's share of the Lincoln County business, what can you, so, we can talk about that.
Great.
I want to go back and ask you something that we talked about, I think in the winter during the budget committees, and I don't know that I wrote this down, and I don't know that if I remembered it correctly, but of the Boothbay Harbor calls, did you tell us in the winter that maybe 30% or so of them come from St. Andrews Village area?
I would have to look at those numbers again. I didn't pull the reports based on that. We've done that in the past. Usually we do it at year end, we used to separate the calls that were generated at the emergency room, the calls that were generated at the St. Andrews Village, and then we would just add, bring those numbers in as kind of food for thought, and so that people can understand it. But I don't have those numbers right in front of me.
Fair enough. Is that something you could look at later this week and email us?
Yep. I can tell you that from just knowing the calls that have been out there, the call volume to the village has been down. I know their census is down also, but
Maybe people are healthier. That's not a bad thing.
no, I mean, there has been a lower call volume up there. And some of that's from transporting patients themselves. They have people that'll drive the vans more often, and they'll take wheelchair patients themselves. It kind of comes and goes. And then, families and who's where and who can help out. But it's been better up there.
Okay, good. Well, if you can email us that, that'd be great.
Yep.
Thanks. Anybody else, any questions? No? Sorry.
Probably it sounds like you're well on the way to increased professionalism and uniformity in your reporting and accounting, and we appreciate that, and thank you.
Thank you. We're trying.
I think we might just want to follow up with you after you get your audit back and have a firmer grasp on
Yep.
the year-end numbers.
Yep.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, so moving on.
If you want to go back to the minutes, I
Oh,
can.
are you?
Yes, it was actually quite simple, that In the minutes, it said after you took the minutes off the consent agenda that Russ motioned to approve and JD seconded, but that didn't occur, couldn't occur because you were offering corrections to the minutes, so and then later on it said you provided the motion to accept the minutes as amended. So we have double motions in there. I think they started to approve and then you just wanted to take them off the consent
what?
agenda. So this first motion is
Needs to be
really,
deleted.
yes, needs to be deleted.
Okay, so that's it?
Yep, that's
Otherwise,
it.
it's fine.
You
So
wanna
you're making
pass
the-
that down, and I'll get it to
Yeah,
Kelly?
sure.
So you're making the motion to,
Approve the minutes as corrected.
As amended.
okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Any more discussion about the minutes? All in favor?
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on. Our audit report.
Not sure if you have a summary already.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
You
yeah,
did?
we
I did a while ago,
received
yeah.
it, but
Yeah.
it's nice to get a.
Okay, yep,
get a
I'll give a
printout
fresh
of it.
copy just in case.
That's great.
Great.
This is Brandon, by the way.
My name is Brandon, I'm from William Brewer CPA Company.
Hi.
Thank you.
I'd like to start off initially summarizing a letter that we give to Tom at the conclusion of the audit. Summary of it is management's responsible for selection and use of appropriate accounting policies. There were no policies that were adopted that were new during the year, and no current existing policies had changed. We noted no transactions entered into by the town of Boothbay Harbor during the year for which there was a lack of authoritative guidance or consensus. Management has used some estimates in the preparation of the financial statements, and the most sensitive estimate affecting the financial statements is depreciation on fixed assets. That's due to an approximate life of the fixed assets and how long they're actually going to be, the value is going to remain with them. We encountered no significant difficulties with the dealings with management in performing the course of the audit, and there were no disagreements with management during the course of the audit. The letter that I handed out to you, it's a peer review. Any auditing firm that performs audits must once every 3 years go through a peer review process, whereas a peer auditing firm comes in and essentially audits us. They look at, they test our controls as a company, our practices, and the appropriate regulation adherence of the firm to make sure that we're up to standards. You can receive 3 ratings. It's either a pass with deficiencies, or a fail. I'm kind of summarizing the last paragraph in the letter. William H. Brewer CPA and Company received a pass with no deficiencies. Our first peer review was 1989, and we've received a pass rating of 9 times with no deficiencies. Next, I would like to move to the summary. Here it kind of gives us a synopsis of the last 7 years, and I'm looking at this. Yeah, the handout. Do you need one?
You have it?
Be good.
Yes, I do, absolutely.
Good, if we had some, yeah.
Okay.
We have? Oh, there we go.
Sorry.
I like this individual view. It gives us a span of 7 years and how the town's been doing. Typically, I'll start at the top. Cash balance is about 2.3 million. No significant change over last year. There are some capital projects that have been finished, including the fish pier. So the variance in the balance of cash is within normal range. I do want to add that with the cash balance, typically I like to see 2 to 3 months cushion and the cash balance personally. Looking at it, if you also have the financial statements with you, on Exhibit A, or excuse me, Schedule A2, it's actually page 28 in the bottom right-hand corner. There's a second to bottom number there, $7,699,000. What I like to do is take that as the total expenses for the year for the town, and divide by 12, and kind of straight line the expenses out, though they may vary throughout the year. And if you take the 2.3 million, subtract the 8% of budget, leaves you with 1.7. And 1.9 million is actually averaged out. So you're right around, a little lower, but right around where we would like to see a town. Annual budget remained slightly higher than last year. Tax commitment was increased just slightly. Outstanding taxes, you'll see there's a good trend there with them actually going back down again. You can thank the ladies at the front office and Julia and progressively going after those to collect the balances. The collection percentage is back up to where we'd like to see it, around 98%. Fund balance remained essentially unchanged. The reserve balance increased, approximately $30,000 to $40,000. Again, no TAN borrowing. The town has been in great financial condition. If you look back at the undesignated fund balance line, see back in 2000, it was a negative $2,000 undesignated fund balance. That has increased back up to a point that's good for the town's benefit. Excise taxes. The budget was a little low this year, remained flat. That's not unusual. Excise taxes are now going up again. Typically, you see the fluctuation of them going down as older cars are in the market, or people buying used cars, not necessarily brand new cars. It's a 6% increase over last year. We typically estimate 4% conservatively as an increase, so you did very well there. Investment income, a slight increase over last year of about $7,000. State revenue sharing was budgeted at $80,000. The actual amount was $46,000. Myself and Bill had a meeting with Julie and Tom looking over the last 2 historic years for the towns of Boothbay Harbor and Boothbay, and it is a trend across all towns that we audit that the state revenue sharing numbers are decreasing.
Can I add something to that?
Yes, absolutely.
On Friday, I had a managers meeting in Rockland that I facilitated, and we had David Ledoux there from the State Property Tax Division, and that was my first question to him, was what was going on with revenue sharing. And he pointed out that the state had been allocating 5.1% of sales tax revenue to be put towards revenue sharing. That's been cut down to 2%. That's what's making a real big impact on a lot of municipalities. So it wasn't simply this town's sales tax.
Yep.
It's that they're allocating less money to it. They're rating that fund.
Yep.
So that's what made the big difference.
So going forward, we'd like to see potentially, a lower budgeted amount on that, as to not exceed, as to not budget for a higher amount than you're actually going to receive. Homestead reimbursement, essentially unchanged. And parking income, a slight increase.
Can we go back to the state revenue, though, when you say going
Yes.
forward? I mean, given from what you just heard, then, how do we budget going forward?
Tom has,
Well, I asked David to do that as well, and he said, well, I mean, obviously, the first thing you do is assume that it's going to stay the same or get worse.
Yeah.
So as you said, budget for the $46,000. That's going to be kind of a crapshoot. We've got an election coming up too, so things could change. I don't know, but we may know better by December or January as to how to budget for that.
Well, that's true.
yeah. So that's essentially the summary. I personally think the town is in great condition so far. Suggestions that I have for improvement is continue funding the reserves. If we can flip to page 22 in the financial statements. You'll see a chart here. And in the additions column, oops, negative 205, negative 19,000. Do you see those two numbers?
Yep.
That's your current year depreciation. It adds up approximately to $225,000. The amount that was put into reserves for the current year was $85,000. What I'm alluding to in this is the depreciation of the buildings. The value that's diminishing within the buildings is exceeding the amount that you're putting into reserves. Being proactive, it's not a bad thing right now because, like I said earlier in my first introduction, one of the estimates is depreciation. One thing that Bill and myself had discussed was that funding the reserves is of great importance. If something does happen, for instance, you see in the newspaper the town of Edgecombe had misappropriated, and during the misappropriation, there's $400,000 that I had found that they didn't include in their tax commitment. So instead of hiking the tax rates, you'll have a little bit more cushion.
So let me ask, knowing
Yes.
that the depreciation schedule is quite different for capital versus equipment, what
The
is sort of...
useful lives.
Yeah, what
Yep.
is, what is the rate of rise of the depreciation amount, say, based on what we have in depreciation for capital assets versus other things? In other words, how much has it changed from last year to this year?
I don't have last year's numbers with me. Essentially, I mean, on the bottom part, the fish pier significantly increased. There's about $400,000 that was put into the fish pier over the last few years.
Right.
So your depreciation for the next 39 years is going to be increased in the fish pier.
Right.
In terms of additions on the general government, you typically see it about flatline. I mean, with the additions of assets, I mean, it's increased a little bit over last year, but nothing really material in nature.
Right, it looks like the majority is comprised of public works. Is that correct?
Of the depreciation?
Yes.
I mean, land is non-depreciable, so that, yes. And you have buildings, vehicles, really buildings and vehicles would be the largest portion of depreciable assets.
Okay.
Reserve funding, again, can be used to level the tax rate. In Edgecombe, you'd see a hike in taxes in the current year in an attempt to make up for the shortfall of the budget last year. Reserves can be used that in the instance that something does happen that's out of the ordinary. You'll have the reserve funding so that you can keep the tax rate at a flat level. Instead of taxpayers seeing a huge decrease, then a huge increase, which can be shocking to them. Reserve funding can be used to level that out. Another thing that we talked about with Tom is that currently, if you take back on the summary sheet over here, investment income was $39,000. If you take that and use it as a percentage of the cash balance, about 1.6% rate of return. Last year was about a 1.3% rate of return. Suggestion that we had at that rate, you're not even surpassing inflation. We suggest potentially opening investment accounts where your rate of return would be more like 8%. I know the town of Wiscasset for last year averaged about... Yes. Yep. I know the town of Wiscasset last year had about 14%. It is a little bit more risk, inherent risk in it, but with investment managers who have experience, I feel like that is a good route to go.
I mean, we talked about Dan Riscotta too, and Dan Riscotta just recently adopted an investment policy. Matt Lutkus was at the meeting on Friday, so I asked him for their investment policy. This might be something we want to actually look through and adopt ourselves as far as what would be our policies towards doing this. Because I think we certainly have the money to start funding some of these reserve accounts and making those accounts earn money, so that those accounts are actually putting money towards themselves, and we're not
Sure.
budgeting for it every year.
Yeah.
So,
Do you happen to know the liquidity position of what towns have done?
I don't.
It would have to be highly liquid.
I would think so.
Yeah.
I don't off the top of my head. I apologize. I didn't bring anything like that with me. I do know that the town of Damascotta does have an investment portfolio themselves. and I'm sure that he would be more than willing to work with you and,
Yep.
you
Yeah,
know.
he said he'd be glad to.
I believe there's a number of firms out there. I'm not sure if they use HM Payson.
They do.
They do.
That's one he mentioned, yep.
Yeah. But they're highly professional over there.
8% sounds really high.
Uh,
I mean,
yep.
Is there some sort of municipal mutual fund, or, I mean, and what's the risk factor at 8%?
And that's all in the management discussion with the actual individual who's managing the investment portfolio. It's all on how the town wants to stand with that. You know, I mean, you can take bonds, you know, level up with some bonds, some mutual funds, some actual stocks, so.
Is that recommendation written in here?
It is not, no, it was verbal, and it was during our closing exit with Tom and Julia. Some slight concerns, nothing, anything is significant. If you turn to page 23. Here, you'll see overexpended or over budgeted revenues, over-expended expenses or over budgeted revenues. Nothing of significant nature on the revenue side across the board. We did over budget just a little bit. That being said, with the collections of excise tax being significantly higher than last year, it did completely, well, essentially cover most of those over budgeted revenues. Again, state revenue sharing, it was $33,000. That's one of the first numbers under the revenue section. But going forward, you know, we'd like to budget for flat over last year, and not try to anticipate revenue so much, and just
So are you saying in general that the budget is an overestimate since there are so many negative variances here?
this is a summary of the schedule of A4, which is the big foldout. If you look at page 30. That schedule that you were just looking for
Uh-huh.
solely picks out the negative in the column, in the unexpended, the second to right column.
Right, the
So-
overdraft.
Right, yep. So if you look at the total under governmental revenues, which is the second section, we anticipated $10,000 more than we actually did collect in revenues.
So I'm still back on page 23 and
Yes.
trying to figure out how to read this.
Okay.
So there are two sections, expenditures at the top, revenues, second half.
Correct.
Appropriation and revenue.
Yes. Appropriation
Is that our budget?
yes.
And the
Yep.
next column is actual?
Correct.
All right.
Yep. Yep. That's exactly how you read it. I think that was essentially, yes?
Wait, so can I follow up? Because it seems as if your only recommendation then is not to overestimate the state revenue sharing. Are there any more global recommendations than that particular one, given the number of expenditure to appropriation negative variances that you list?
A lot of them are small and immaterial. Again, my other recommendation was the investment policy, earning more interest on capital reserves. Noting variances like this, you know, most of them are small.
Got miscellaneous revenue, 24,000. I'm not familiar enough with the budget because I'm not on the
Yep.
budget committee to know what goes into that, but
Yep.
it would appear as if you are summarizing by indicating there's more optimistic budgeting than the expenditures would warrant. Is that a fair statement?
Just budgeting just a little bit high on the revenue aspect.
All right.
Just thinking that, you know, a little bit more is going to be coming in receipts than actually were in the current year. Many things can factor and influence the amount of revenues that are going to be received in any current year, so.
Okay.
Do mention to them that extra $121,500.
Yes, absolutely.
That makes a huge difference.
Yep. In the course of the audit, when the tax commitment was being done, we found there was a balance forward that was not factored into the actual commitment. It was $120,000. Because of the way the article was written of the carry forward of the ambulance service, only $34,000 was allowed to be carried forward, essentially dumping in, if you look at the A4, and to show you exactly, it's page 30, the third column, under health, welfare, and recreation, the ambulance service, you see it, they have $120,577.
Yeah.
Everybody see that? Yep.
Yeah.
Essentially, the way the article was written is $34,000 is the balance forward all the way to the right that was limited to carry forward. So you had $120,000 that dumped into surplus.
That wasn't expected on my account, but that does inflate the numbers a bit.
Yeah.
Yep. And it was for the benefit, it helped the town.
We'll take it if you want to balance it out.
No. We've already spent it, right?
Yeah.
But am I correct in saying that then, if I look at the sum of pluses and minuses, we were off by $10,000
Right.
Just on the revenue aspect. Yep.
on a $790,000
Which is
budget, so.
is very good.
Bad percentage.
It is very good.
Okay,
very good.
And though some of the revenue columns were a little over budgeted, excise was significantly under budgeted at $70,000. Was received more than it was actually budgeted, so it did all balance out. And if you want to look at page 31, which is the second pulled-out page, I'm looking at the bottom number, second to the right, 396,000. That's the total amount that you were actually under budget.
Oh, yeah.
So, including expenditures and revenues, you're under budget by almost $400,000. So, that's very good as well. I think I've covered essentially what I had to cover, unless there was any other questions that you'd like me to entertain.
Yeah.
So, just on your last point, the fact that we were off on revenues by $10,000, but to the good, nearly $400,000.
Yep.
Means we controlled the heck out of expenses.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
So I have a question. Thank you for that explanation. I was trying to find in your description the summary of how you found internal controls. I just wonder if you could point that out, or if it's not written, if you could provide a summary of how you found internal controls.
For the town of Boothbay Harbor?
Yeah, that's usually what an audit will look like, that also.
Yes, yeah. Just generally speaking, every aspect of the audit that we look at has internal control issues, whether it be cash, who's the authorized signer on the individual cash checking account, who's signing the warrants, who is check authorization authority. Those are the things that we look at. It's essentially just the normal course of the audit. Professional skepticism is what we like to practice. Going in with the mindset of being independent in nature. So those are all things that we look at in the course of the audit.
Right. And I guess I'm just not familiar, perhaps you all have already received some information about internal controls as part of previous audits. Just, do we have policies for, say, dual signatures on amounts over?
Yep.
All right. Do we have it published anywhere where we have our internal controls, or what our internal
We
controls
do
are?
have it published, yeah. I don't have it with me, but.
All right, and, yeah.
Yeah, there's
sometime
there's checks and balances on everything, and everything's, double checked, so no one person does the entire process. So, that was recommended even before I got here by previous auditors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are in place. Yep.
Okay.
Those are sort of red flag things that if we do come across them, we definitely touch upon them.
Great.
Most cases, there are internal control situations, such as the person doing the bank runs, the person signing checks and signing the warrants, isn't the same individual doing the bank reconciliations. So it makes it difficult.
Yeah,
and
that's good.
Yes, yeah, for any fraud to exist.
Great, thank you very much.
thank you for the report. It sounds like
Very
we're,
good.
continue to be in good shape.
Yes, yeah,
So,
yeah.
Do we make a motion to accept the audit?
Well, you can't refuse it.
Usual. Well, usually a motion to accept
that.
means that we've reviewed it and feel it's acceptable and fair, so,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Can I
so
consider
moved.
that a motion?
Yeah.
Second.
Okay, any more discussion about the audit?
It's really good.
Okay, all in favor of accepting the audit? Okay, thanks
you,
very
Brandon.
much.
Thank you.
Okay, question from the
Thank
audience?
Yeah, I don't know if this is an appropriate time to ask. I'm curious about this parking income. And I don't know if this is an appropriate time to ask, or could ask about how that breaks down. Is that what we're generating from what we collect out of the parking lots and the tickets that we give?
Yes, parking lots, tickets, meters, etc.
Okay.
Any type of.
And that is prior to, so that is probably, is that net or gross?
This is gross.
That's gross,
Yeah.
okay. So net, everybody's salaries come into that, who are doing that, and expenses. And I remember we were talking about parking before, and a figure of about 17,000 cleared was one that sticks in my mind. So we collect 102,000, or about 100,000 every year, and then virtually 80% of that goes towards.
Well, it's not, they're totally separate. It's just like the revenue we receive from moorings and things like that. That doesn't go to pay for the harbor master and so forth. All this money goes into one pot and pays all town expenses. So the way you're doing the accounting there isn't the way we do it.
Well, I'm just wondering where we came up with the $17,000 figure, which was, I understand a loose figure. I was asking,
I don't know
how
where,
much does parking really make it? So
Yeah,
you're
your
billing-
memory's better than mine.
yeah, I don't know where you're coming up with
But,
that.
no, I think that's the right ballpark. It was something like that.
That was our profit from parking?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what,
Okay. I don't remember, and I didn't bring the budget with me tonight, so.
well, I think it was
don't-
around 17,000,
Zero.
I remember right, yeah.
What I find interesting about it is that if you look at it over the last 6, 7 years, it's relatively flat,
Mhm.
you know? So kind of understanding what that means. Does that mean we've
This is the
been,
parking lots
There's-
are full a high percentage of the
Yeah,
time.
there's a maximum return you can get on those lots.
Yeah.
and
And we haven't raised
we're turning
rates,
people
so
away.
with fixed number of spots and fixed number of rates, the only other variable is capacity. And if you're at capacity,
That's
then it's
it.
going to be flat.
so that's all that means. So, I don't know, I guess I want to drill a little deeper. That doesn't mean then that in terms of seasons being a little bit longer, or, I don't know. Yeah, that
Well,
we're,
nobody's like into it. I mean, it is a moneymaker for the town. Parking is a moneymaker for the town.
I just see it as an indication of economic development. I'm just trying to see if we can get any more information out of it. You know, what does it tell us about our town? You know, does it tell us that we need more parking, or we need to raise rates, or doesn't it tell us anything? I'm just curious.
I think that probably goes beyond the scope of the audit.
We essentially look at the final numbers. I mean, we do look at of course, of comparing them to last year. And in terms of actual number of individuals that are in the lots, we don't go into that much detail.
Well, you just count the beans that we collected.
To some point, yes, to some aspect, but, I think that what you had alluded to was the fact that, you have a certain designated number of spots, and essentially income will remain in that area. Unless you have a really bad summer, you'll see the rates go down.
Yeah. So I think, I think Wendy had brought up a good point. We're kind of beyond the scope of the audit discussion right now, so.
That's why I alluded to the fact that this may not be the appropriate venue
Right, right.
to ask us and realize
So, but parking, I think parking I mean, now we're kind of moving into public forum, which,
Yeah,
there you go.
we'll bring it up. We need to do a
I
little
have
more
one
digging.
other
We'll bring it
item
up
of
later.
new business I'd
That's
like
one of
to
our
bring
favorite
up.
subjects.
Okay,
So,
all right.
Amy, you're free to go.
We'll circle around back to that, so, but I think we appreciate the fact that you came tonight.
Yes.
Yes, thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Thank you very much.
With us and walked us through it, because it's
Good
always
detail.
helpful to be able to connect all those schedules
Yes, yeah.
to each other.
And I know that I've been here personally 3 years. Our firm has been doing the audit for over 7 years. And at which point you develop a professional yet good relationship with your town and your client. And anything that we learn, I feel like we really do a good job coming down here, help training. As soon as we get trained, we come down and help Julie, as best as we can. And I feel like our lines of communication are open. So.
Good.
Good.
Thanks again.
Yep. Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
Brandon.
Okay, Wendy.
I wanted to add to new business that's, I have heard some discussion that there's going to be repaving of the road of 27 just immediately prior to the Southport Bridge. And I wondered if that was true and if we can find out if it's true, because if there's going to be a fair amount of road work there, that is one area in the town that we could sorely use additional space on the side of the road for either walking traffic or even bicycling, as the entrance to the bridge is a very, very hazardous place for anyone except anyone in a car.
It's funny you mention that, because Mrs. Yale sent me an email the other day, from the
Yeah.
Forbes and Weirs, on the same topic, and I explained to her that that was a state project and a water district project, and
That's right, it was a water,
Yeah.
it's laying the water lines,
yeah,
they're
it's
digging
not,
it
it's
up.
not a municipal
Yeah.
project. And all the planning and funding and so forth for that is already done, as they've already begun construction. Bob Fonts was the one who was asking about it. I guess she had touched base with him, the Lincoln County planner. And he sent her back a very long explanation as to why that wasn't included in this particular project now, because of the engineering work that would have to go into it and the additional money and so on and so forth. So I don't think there are any plans whatsoever at this point with the project that they're doing over there that includes sidewalks. But there will be some repaving, because they have to dig up to do some of the connections to the water to Southport and so forth. So they'll repave that back to the town standards. But according to Bob Fonts, there's no plans for a sidewalk over there.
Well, perhaps, is Bob coming tomorrow? Yeah, perhaps we could
I think so,
ask
yeah.
him how do we get in front of that process? Because we
Yeah.
keep talking about this over and over again, of, 96 ought to have a bike lane. If you ride your bike over to Southport, it's incredibly hazardous on that part of the road. And every time, MDOT came in and they repaved already and they didn't add any side. So it'd be great to try and figure out how do we get in front of those discussions so we can have some discussions with MDOT about a different approach than just digging up and repaving without doing the things that are in the long-range plan for both Boothbay and Boothbay Harbor, which is making this a more livable and walkable community, because that would be a great place to improve safety, frankly. Just from a safety aspect, it would be really, really nice. So I'll ask him tomorrow. But thanks, I appreciate that insight. Thanks,
Okay.
Denise.
You're quite welcome. So moving on, public forum. Any public forum comments?
Yeah,
Frank.
Frank Bassett, Boothbay Harbor. On a very positive note, and I'll lead off with the Bike Main event that happened. And that, coupled with the 250th anniversary on the Common in Boothbay, and along with the joint selectmen meetings that we're now having, really feel like we're moving in some wonderful directions with bringing and involving the town and municipality with businesses, and we're all working together. And I think the way that the Bike Main went off, it was great. Tom did a terrific job of really kind of bringing the players together. And what I really appreciated was we had a part in it from the brewery and coordinating the restaurants, and he let us do our job. And so it was great that we got these people to come here. We've had at least two, since I've been working there, people who did that event from Maine, who came back the next week saying, I never knew there was so much down here, what a great town. They stayed the weekend. They came to try our beer again, and more of them raved about everything. It was a great chance for us to show off our town, and I think it's a great example of the municipality being able to lure things in like that and then pull in the private sector and working together. We had the town crew down there helping with the tents, you had the high school involved, you had the Y involved, you had the schools involved, you had everybody involved, and private merchants. And it's an example of what I think we can do, just a small example, and I hope just a start of what we can do. We have tremendous assets down here in both, solid assets and restaurants and facilities and beds and pillows to put people, on. And then we also have incredible amount of talent of people to pull this stuff together. But it's important, and I think the towns are moving in the direction of creating that fertile field, that fertile ground, and not getting, and not only not getting in the way, but holding hands with the private sector. And it's just a great example, and I think it went smoother certainly than I thought it would, although I had high hopes for it. But everybody that I've spoken to who were involved with it, directly or indirectly, were amazed, as they were with the 250th on the Common, where the Boothbay municipal facilities were involved also. Great job, you guys. And just know that, if you come up with these things, another bike main type thing, contacts the town, present it. It's too much for the town to take on all alone. But feel free to contact, your business arm of your town and see what we can throw together. Really, it was, these people were saying it was the best stop they had. And so it was awful weather. We did a good job, but I just wanted to say that hopefully it's just the start of what we can do.
Great,
Very
thank you.
exciting.
Thank you, Frank.
Yeah,
Yeah.
congratulations, Tom.
Thank you.
Tom, terrific job.
Good job, Tom.
Anything
That's a lot.
else?
And I'm happy to, for once.
I may give you a hug, Frank.
Get that on,
Whoa,
get that on the
whoa.
tape.
That was a pretty nice plug right there.
Mr. Tomko.
Thank you. Mike Tomko, 59 Rhodes End. I just want to make mention that may not have gone noticed, but this evening there's a soft opening taking place over at Mel's Wood-Fired Pizza. They've been, my understanding, they've received approval from the State Fire Marshal, and you've got two young individuals who have come before the planning board and received approval. They've worked quite a bit with Jeff in order to get all their permits done, and they're thrilled to be here. I think we've been fortunate with the planning board this year to review a number of small businesses, people starting here in town, and whether it was a salon or the pottery studio that's going in at 93 Townsend, I think it's an exciting time. So congratulations to them and the others that are opening up. And I think it reflects well on the town that we have young people that want to invest in our region.
It's great. Great
See, Mike,
news.
after the meeting's got coupons.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we have no need for an executive session tonight, so I think we'll move on to warrants. Can I have a motion to approve the warrants?
Move that we approve the warrants upon review.
Second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor of approving the warrants? Motion carries. And can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
This is not debatable. All in favor? Okay, thanks, everybody.